Erev Tov, we are back to our Shiurei Aggadeta. After a little bit of a break, we're getting right into the next sugya, which we are dealing with in Masechet Berachot. There's a few different places you can find us in the sugya. For tonight's shiur, you may actually need both of them. So attached to the PDF, attached to the Zoom invitation to tonight's class, also in the Google Classroom, are two different Gemara files. You have one of them which says Aggadeta, maybe it says En Yaakov, and the other one should say Aggadeta Talmud Bavli or Vilna Shas or something like that. Do you see both of those files attached?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So we have also a third link on there, which would be the Sefaria. So if you would like a Hebrew-English translation that's not in your Gemara, you're more than welcome to go get one over there, B'ezrat Hashem, by clicking on the Sefaria link. What we did the last time around, we took a sugya from the En Yaakov. We discussed it well. The first time we just studied it on a face value. We read through the Mishnah and we understood the words and on what the Mishnah is trying to tell us. The next time around, we came together and dug a little bit deeper, a little more than just Rashi. We discussed various opinions to understand not the halachic side of the sugya, but of the textual side. What does it actually mean? And as I said, those pieces that we did from the Ben Ish Chai, from Harav Kook, from whoever it was that we dug into, those pieces would not have been properly understood had we not built a solid foundation first in the sugya. So for the next shiur or two or three, we're going to be dealing properly with how to understand the sugya. After we get the sugya, and you'll know the sugya by heart, just like you know the last Mishnah by heart. What do I mean by heart? You know when we say Shema in the evening. We say Shema in the evening when 3 stars come out. And Rabbi Eliezer says until the end of the first watch. And Chachamim say until midnight. And Rabban Gamliel says until the morning. And the children came back from the wedding hall and they forgot to say Shema. Rabban Gamliel says you could still say Shema as long as it's not done. And what about the Chachamim? What do they say? What about the Chachamim? Would the Chachamim agree that you can say Shema Yisrael after midnight? Would the Chachamim agree that you can say Shema Yisrael after midnight?
I think they would, but they don't recommend you wait.
Very good. So they would. So then why Baruch did the Chachamim say stop at midnight if really you could say it all the way till the morning?
So you wouldn't forget to say it altogether.
Very good. Kedei leharchik adam min ha'avera. To keep a person away from the avera of actually forgetting to say Shema Yisrael entirely. Just like you're able to do that right now, by the time we finish studying this next sugya, I expect that every one of you will know to be able to say what we call the shakla v'tarya, the give and take of the sugya, in order so that when we're analyzing details, it'll make sense to you what we're analyzing. I cannot tell you how many times I listen to people give shiurim where they teach things, but they never did the favor to their talmidim of teaching it on a fundamental level, on what you might call it elementary level. I don't think there's anything wrong with being in elementary school. It would be a mistake to try to study mathematics without first knowing numbers. It would be a mistake to try to do advanced mathematics without mastering basic mathematics. The same thing is true with the Talmud. It would be a mistake to start analyzing and digging, and people ask questions and they want answers, and you can't ask questions and get answers until you truly understand what's in front of you right now. So for the beginning, I'm going to be learning in the En Yaakov itself. Yes, and I'll tell you that it's interesting that sometimes you'll find variant texts between the En Yaakov and the Talmud Vilna that we have in front of us right now, and obviously much of that has to do with the versions of the Talmud which were available at the time and how imperfect the Vilna Talmud is. In fact, the Talmud that we have here from the En Yaakov is actually perhaps even more correct. It's a Sephardic preserved version of the Talmud. What you also find is when it comes to vowelizing Aramaic, there are different publishers that vowelize Aramaic differently. I don't know the rules of Aramaic vowelization. I'm sure that other people have spent time studying this. It's not one of my fortes. And so in some books you'll read it this way, in some books that way, but it's the same words that everyone is trying to get at. So if you open up the En Yaakov, you should go to the page that says not Aleph at the top, but it should say Bet at the top. Do you see that? It has a Bet on the top right of the page. Right on top of Rashi, it says Bet. I'll tell you where it is in your PDF. If somebody finds it before me, please tell me. Here. You are in the En Yaakov. It's a sections 1 through 6. You see that? So we're going to be on page 4 of the PDF. Yeah, you see where I am? Not that PDF, the other PDF.
Okay, Roger. Okay.
Do you see the other PDF? However, for those of you who have your cameras on, I so appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Berachot Parak Rishon Bet.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it says on the top of the page. Very good. That one. Somebody else asked a question? No. Okay. So here says the Gemara.
First with the Gemara.
Yeah, very good. That's exactly where we're at. Gemara. Actually, in many ways, reading to you. Okay, so the Gemara had a little bit of it before we skipped that part. So the En Yaakov is not a complete Talmud. And En Yaakov skipped the first part of the Gemara, and it's bringing us to the next part of the Gemara. So if you're using an art scroll Gemara or a Koran Gemara, where we're going to be in the Hebrew is in the middle of the page, you see a Gimel Mem, like in the traditional Vilna page. We'll be down from there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, about 15 lines down from where it says Gemara in the regular Vilna Talmud. So we learn in our Mishnah that when do we begin saying Shema? Misha'a she'kohanim nichnasim ne'echol b'tkumatan. We begin saying Shema Yisrael from the moment in which the Kohanim enter to eat their teumah. So now the Gemara has a question. Mikdi or Mikdeh. Kohanim emat ka achle teruma. The Kohanim. So Kohanim which became impure. And now they've immersed themselves in the Mikveh. At which point are they allowed to eat teruma? Mishat tzedek kochavim, from when 3 stars come out. That's the answer. So when are Kohanim allowed to eat teruma? From when 3 stars come out. If that's the case, Litaneh, the Mishnah should have said, the Tana, the author of the Mishnah should have said, Mishat tzedek kochavim. When the Mishnah asked, from when do we say Shema in the evening? Why does it bother telling us from when the Kohanim enter to their Teumah? The Mishnah should have just said from when 3 stars come out. Forget previously any answers we gave in the realms of connections and Kohanim and Shema. Those are not Pshat answers. The Gemara here wants to know, why does the Tana insist on telling us this phrase, from when Kohanim enter to Teumah? Why not say from when 3 stars come out? Now, those are the same time, right? So the Gemara answers, Milta agav oche kamashmalan. The Tana is trying to teach us agav oche. What is agav oche? In Hebrew we would say derech agav. What does derech agav mean? What is oche? We say in the Gemara, orach ara. Or in Hebrew we would say derech eretz. What does it mean, derech eretz? What is a derech? On a way, on a road.
It's common sense.
Agav orche means along the road, meaning if he's anyways taking this road, he's taking a detour off the road. The Tana is derech agav. He's teaching us something besides the point. It's not the main point of his Mishnah, but he's teaching us another thing while he's teaching us his main point. What's that second thing he's teaching us? Kohanim emat ka'achle. When do the Kohanim come eat their teumah, bituma? Mishat tzedek chavim. The Kohanim come to eat their teumah when 3 stars come out. So the first thing that the Tana is teaching us is this halacha. When do Kohanim eat their teumah? When 3 stars come out. V'ha kamashmalan. And the chidush, the novel insight that the Tana is teaching us, the chapara la me'akva. That his kapara is not me'akev. What is kapara? When our Chachamim talk about kapara, atonement, what's they referring to? There's steps here. A person becomes tameh. He waits 7 days. He goes to the mikveh. What's the next step after a person becomes pure? In many cases, not all cases, but in many cases. What does he do in the Beit HaMikdash?
He can eat from the Torah.
What does he do in the Beit HaMikdash?
He brings a korban.
Brings a korban, very good. He brings a korban. So in Hebrew, we call that sacrifice kapara, his atonement, if we're going to borrow a King James word. His atonement is not me'akev. What is me'akev? What does it mean to be me'akev somebody?
Block, to make it that doesn't matter. Like
To block, to hinder them, to hold them back. His kapara is lo me'akva. His sacrifice does not hold him back from his ability to eat his terumah. Meaning, the Tanakh is teaching us here, not just that the time the Kohanim entered to eat their terumah, and at the time that, at that time is tzedek chavim, the Tanakh is teaching us something else. The Tanakh is teaching us that even though the Kohen has not yet brought his korban, once 3 stars come out, he's permitted to go eat his terumah without waiting to offer a sacrifice. When does a Kohen offer the sacrifice, by the way?
it would be in the morning, I would imagine, not at night.
Very good, because we don't offer a korbanot at night. So when does he offer? If he waits until, let's count, a person becomes tameh. He now waits 7 days. When does a person go to the mikveh after waiting 7 days? On the 7th day? On the beginning of the 8th. Meaning that night where a person goes to the mikveh, do me a favor, never call it a mikveh. I don't know what a mikveh is. A mikveh, that night that a person goes to the mikveh, is already the beginning of the 8th. According to halakha, that's the 8th day. So when does a person offer their sacrifice? Not that night, but the next day, right? The next morning. B'yom hashmini, that 8th day. So we're learning here, from the way that Tana teaches us the Mishnah, he's intentionally invoking the name of the Kohanim, because he's teaching us another halakha. Another halakha is, what? Not only do the Kohanim eat their terumah when 3 stars come out, but that the only thing the Kohanim need in order to eat their terumah is to go to the mikveh and for 3 stars to come out. They don't need to offer their sacrifice before they are allowed to eat their terumah. Now rabbis are going to bring a proof to this from a Baraita. Kiditanya, like we learned in a Baraita. What's a Baraita? But there's different ways. Some people say Barieta. The way I heard it, my rabbis is a Baraita.
The Masechta of the Gemara.
What is it, Baraita?
A small contrast to what is it?
It's a Tanaic work it's a work of the Tanaim that was not included in the Mishnah.
Okay. Part of Rabbi Yonatan Halevyy's job, very good, Rabbi Yosef. Part of Rabbi Yonatan Halevyy's job when he was compiling the Mishnah is that there are certain things that make the cut and certain things that don't make the cut. So certain things that Tanaim wrote, but that weren't, for whatever reason, included inside of the canonized Mishnah of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. Those texts have weight. Those are like, what do you say? Tanaic. That's a fancy word. Those are works of Tanaim. But they're works of Tanaim that are unincorporated. So there's the incorporated Mishnah and the unincorporated Baraita or Baraitot. Baraita literally means, the definition of the word Baraita is something on the outside. The external, those that made the cut, that came in, and those that didn't make the cut. They stayed on the outside. So a Baraita has tremendous weight. Maybe not as much weight as a canonized Mishnah, but a tremendous amount. So Kehillat, like we learned in the Baraita. It says in the Torah, let's look up this pasuk already on our own. So open up Vayikra. Book. I attached a link in Sefaria. So if you want to open up the Zoom invitation, at the bottom there's a link that takes you to the book of Vayikra, chapter 22. You have Chumash in front of you or Sefaria in front of you? Chapter 22. Here, I have a Chumash here. Pasuk Zayin. So verse 7. Vayikra 22:7. Let's read together in the Torah. Vaydaber Adonai Moshe lemor, the beginning of chapter 22. And Hashem speaks to Moshe saying, Daber el Aaron, speak to Aaron vel banav, the children. Vaynazeru mikadshei bnei Israel, velo yichalu et shem kodshi, asher hem magdishim li ani Adonai. They should, here is the word nazir in a verb form. What does a nazir do? A nazir abstains from things. They have a mitzvah to abstain, to withdraw themselves from the holy things of the Jewish people, so they should not desecrate my name. Emor alehem, tell them, the dorotechem, for all your generations, kol ish asher yikrav mikol zarachem el hakodashim, asher yakdishu v'nei Israel Adonai, v'tumato alav, anybody who comes close, any of your kohanim offspring, that come close to any of the holy things, meaning those things that are offered in the Bet Mikdash while they're still timeim, v'tumato alav, that his tumah, his impure status is still there. V'nichreta hanefesh ahi milfanai ani Adonai, and I will cut off, spiritually excommunicate this person's soul from before me. I am Hashem. We have a similar usage in Yom Kippurim. What does it say? V'chol hanefesh asher lo te'uneh be'etzem hayom hazeh. Right? The conclusion is v'chata hanefesh hahi mikerev ha'ama, that is cut off from its people. That nefesh. Now you could say here it's a little different. Milfanai, it's even more cut off from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ish, every person, mizera Aaron, from the descendants of Aaron, v'hu tzarua ozav b'kodashim, and he is a tzarua. What is a tzarua? He has the tzarat, meaning he spoke lashon hara, right? Ozav b'kodashim lo yochal ad asher yitar, and there's some kind of nocturnal emission. He's not allowed to eat from these kodashim until he becomes purified. V'anogea b'chol tmei nefesh o ish sher tetzeh mimeno shechvat zara, or any person that touches, anyone who touches a dead body, or again has some kind of seminal emission, is not allowed to touch these things. O ish asher yiga b'chol sheretz asher yitma lo, or a person who touches any type of contaminated swarming thing. Or if he touches anybody else that makes him a tameh. Nefesh asher tiga bo v'tamad ha'arev v'lo yochal min hakodashim ki marchatz besaro b'mayim. So he is tameh until the evening, and he should not eat from the holy food until when? Until he's immersed himself in a mikveh. And what's the next pasuk? This next pasuk is all that we're going to be discussing in this piece of Talmud. Uva hashemesh v'taher. And after the sun has set, uva hashemesh, the sun has set. You might think, speaking modern Hebrew, uva hashemesh means when the sun came. Here comes the sun. No. This is uva hashemesh, right? This one here is the hefech. Uva hashemesh in Jewish text means the sun has set. V'achar yochal min hakodashim ki lachmohu. And only afterwards can he eat from the kodashim, for it's his food. This pasuk, uva hashemesh v'taher. And after he goes to the mikveh, the sun sets and he's now pure. V'achar yochal min hakodashim, and then he's allowed to eat from the kodashim ki lachmohu, because that is his bread. So now that you know this pasuk, don't close it yet. You might need the chumash again. Don't close it yet. Let's go back to the Gemara. The Gemara says the following. Kidetanya, this teaching of the Tana, that a Kohen does not have to offer a sacrifice before he eats his food, is also found in a Berachot. What it says, Uva hashemesh v'taher. And the sun sets and he becomes pure. After he becomes pure, what does the Torah say he could do? He could eat. Very good. So what do you see? Biat shimsho me'akavto melechol b'truma. It's the setting of the sun that holds him back from eating teruma. Because so long as the sun has not set, he's not allowed to eat teruma. Even though he went to the mikveh. When does he go to the mikveh?
Before sunset.
Yeah, I mean, that's not before the sun sets. Is a person allowed to go to the mikveh before sun sets?
Yes.
So why?
Yes, yes.
In this case, yes.
Double yes.
Why in other cases do we not allow someone to go to the mikveh before sunset?
Usually they'll go to allow relationships with their spouse.
Right, so we want to avoid thinking about that's right. Essentially, we don't allow them to because we're afraid they're going to come home before the 3 stars come out, and then they'll be with their spouses, and then that will be a problem. There are times, by the way, where a posek might decide that there's a pressing reason for this. The problem is that the people who run the mikvot have no idea about halakha. You know those people, they run the mikvot, Hashem Yishmo. No, there's a few ways to go to Gan Eden. One of them is to be a holy person who helps people in the mikveh. Another way is to be a person who helps people in the mikveh, is to go to Gehinnom. It's a double-edged sword. Depends what kind of person you are. Most of the people that I've heard of or I've known, they're the ones that go straight to Gehinnom. That's how it works. They don't know halachot. Then all of a sudden they became the chief rabbi of the whole world. Someone comes. I had a situation once, you'll see on my website, I have a letter. Once I wrote a letter to the rabbi of a mikveh in, where was it? I don't want to tell you where it was. It doesn't make a difference. Well, not in California. Somebody called me. They were having a hard time going to the mikveh for reason X, Y, Z. The Balanit, the person who works in the mikveh, decided that this lady had to do certain things in order to go to the mikveh. By the way, what's the reason we have a lady in the mikveh? What's the Balanit? What's her job?
Make sure the hair goes in.
Right, her whole job, the only purpose, the only reason for her existence is to make sure that when a person immerses herself in the mikveh, that all of her hair goes under the water. She can't look above the water, so she goes. Now there's a very easy way to avoid needing a balanit. Give me an example. How can one make sure that her hair goes under the water?
Push it down if you're in them.
Okay, very good. Just to make sure all there. Let's say even, what about a hairnet? Someone is toved with a hairnet. She needs a balanit? No, of course not. So the Balanit is only there, I don't know if she's there, to heat up the water. Her job is to hand out towels, whatever her job is, to take people's money. This whole, she now becomes a chief rabbi of the world. She knows halachot, knows hadith. So what happens? This lady needs to go to the mikveh, the Balanit didn't let. The Balanit said, your rabbi has to contact the rabbi of the mikveh to explain the hetarim. And I wrote a letter to the rabbi of the mikveh, and I said, I just want to let you know that it's an embarrassing thing for me that women have to come and ask rabbis to get involved in these questions. A lady tells you halakha is halakha. She learned it from a Talmud Track, from a rabbi, whatever. Why are you asking questions? What's your job? It's not your job. You take the $30, $50, whatever you take, and let her go. Well, what's your problem? There are times where this is required. There was from what I've heard, I'm not part of the community. What I heard in the olden days in the Syrian community in New York is that, Baruch Hashem, the Sfaradim are very careful about Tarat Mishpacha. It's something special. There are a lot of Israelis, for example, you don't even know that they look to you like just regular Israelis. They don't keep Shabbat. But it comes to Tarat Mishpacha, they're very particular. Baruch Hashem. Hashem Israel. What happens is that these ladies will come in the Syrian community. Friday night comes time to go to the mikveh. What happens? They're afraid. They're afraid. It's Brooklyn walking back home alone at night, whatever would happen. They'd come in a car. They're afraid to walk home. And the chief rabbi of the Syrian community had to weigh this scenario. What's better? For her to drive on Shabbat, or for her to go to the mikveh a little bit earlier so she can walk home while there's still light outside, or drive home while there's still light outside. So he made a takana that in his community, a woman who has to go to the mikveh on Friday goes before sunset, and her husband, doesn't make sense how religious or not he is, her husband, when she goes to the mikveh, he leaves the house to go to the Beit Knesset. An hour before Shabbat, he's already in the Beit Knesset saying Tehillim. learning Mishnayot. I don't know what he does. That way he's not in a situation where he's home. He comes home after Tefillah, it's already late enough. Shalom Alisai. But this has to be done with a consultation with a real Talmid Chacham who has Yirat Shamayim, not just Talmid Chacham. So you see here that the only thing that holds him back from eating his terumah is what? Is sunset. Ve'en kaparato me'akavto milechol beterumah. And his kapara, meaning his sacrifice, doesn't hold him back from eating his terumah. So he's going to bring his sacrifice tomorrow, but until tomorrow, he's already allowed to eat his terumah. By the way, let me ask you an interesting thing. Do you know b'halakha, nowadays, where someone is obligated to bring a sacrifice, but because they can't, there's nothing that they do. They're considered completely taho until the Geulah comes and they bring their sacrifice. A modern day case. It happens every day. That would require a paraduma. Let me tell you something you maybe didn't think about. A ger tzedek, somebody who converts to Judaism. There's a few steps. Acceptance of mitzvot, milah, tvilah, kabbalat mitzvot. So bring milah, immersion in the mikveh, and kabbalat mitzvot in themselves. Those three things are required in order to convert to Judaism. The next step, though, the fourth step. What's the fourth step? To bring a kolban in the Beit Mikdash. They have to bring a kolban, a sacrifice in the Beit Mikdash. So what about now? What does the ger tzedek do? So our Chachamim teach us that a person promises, they pledge to bring a kolban when the Beit Mikdash is built. But until then, they're still Jewish. So even though the mikveh, the brit milah, those things hold a person back from becoming Jewish, the kapara is not ma'akev. Even though he's what we call mechusar korban, he's lacking his korban, or she's lacking her korban, it doesn't make a difference. She's Jewish until she has an opportunity to go to the Beit Mikdash and offer a korban. I'm not saying that they're exactly identical to each other, but this is not a new concept, that the korban is part of what we do, but it doesn't hold a person back. So why are we mentioning this teaching here? Because this is proving what we initially asked. We asked, why did the Tana tell us? When do the Kohanim eat terumah? The Tanashav just told us when 3 stars come out. He was trying to teach us the halakha. When do the Kohanim eat terumah? When 3 stars come out. Meaning, if you were thinking that they'll have to wait till tomorrow to eat their terumah, you're mistaken. They don't have to wait until tomorrow. They only have to wait until tonight. And what about the korban? The korban they'll bring tomorrow. And he's bringing another proof from the Baita. The Baita is telling you that this is exactly the case. That the Biat HaShemesh, the setting of the sun, is what holds a person away from their terumah, but not the sacrifice. So now the Gemara has some questions about this Baita. What comes first, the Baita or Gemara? Of course, the Baita. Very good. So now the Gemara is analyzing this Baita. It says the following. The Gemara asks, Umimai dahai uva shemesh lebiat shemesh. From where does the Baita know to understand the pasuk uva hashemesh, the sun sets, that it means biat hashemesh, the setting of the sun. V'hai v'taher, taher yoma, tehar yoma. Tahar Yoma, I saw 3 different nuschaot. In my head, I heard Tahar Yoma. Yeah. And that which it says the sun sets means sunset, how does it know the sun sets means sunset? And how does it know when it says V'taher, it becomes pure, that we mean that the day, Nitar Hayom. What do you mean Nitar Hayom? When we're pure of the day, I mean the day has been cleansed out, the day has passed us after sunset. How does the Baraita know to explain it like this? Dilma, maybe you should explain the pasuk differently. That uva hashemesh, that the sun came, means biat orohu. It's at the moment where the sun rises tomorrow morning. By the way, I'm reading to you this Gemara according to one way. Next time we read this Gemara together, there's a different way to read this Gemara. So I'm not telling you this is the only way to understand even the question of the Gemara. Biat orohu. Maybe when it says the sun is coming, it literally means here comes the sun. It means in the morning. On the 8th day. Umay v'taher. What does it mean in the Torah, v'taher? It's intended taher gavra, that the man himself will take an action to make himself pure. So maybe Beraita, you're reading the pasuk wrong. It doesn't mean uva hashemesh v'taher, the sun sets and now he's pure. Rather, it means uva hashemesh, the sun rises the next morning, v'taher, and he will go purify himself, and then he can eat from the terumah. I mean, from where does the Beraita understand the pasuk this way? Who follows what I'm saying until now? The Gemara is asking a question. It says uva hashemesh v'taher, that the sun sets and a person is pure. How is the person pure? V'taher, because the day is gone. Maybe what it means is, uva hashemesh, the sun rises the next day, v'taher, and he goes to the Beit Mikdash and offers his sacrifice, and then he's pure. In which case, a person would not be allowed to eat terumah when 3 stars come out. They'd have to eat terumah the next day. Yeah. Amar Rabba bar Rav Shila. Rabban bar Rav Shila says, no, that's not the way you understand this. Imken, lemakra vitar. If this was the case, that a person had to take an action, which action? Which action? Offering a korban. The pasuk would have not said vitaher. Vitaher is a passive, past tense word. Rather, it would have said vitar. Vitar is a commandment. It's an active word. Go vitar. Go make yourself pure. So rather, my vitaher, what does it mean vitaher? Taher yoma. Tahar yoma. The day has passed. The day has purified him. And if you want to know, Kedamri inshe, kedamri enashe, there's a few different nikudot to how to say that one as well. It's like what the folk saying goes, what the people say, I'arav shimsha v'itke yoma. The sun has set and the day has passed. So let's say before we get here, this far, the first half of what we just read. Maybe we're reading the pasuk wrong. Maybe the Beraita is reading the pasuk wrong. Maybe when it says uva hashemesh, the sun is coming, it means the sun is rising, not the sun is setting. Vitaher doesn't mean that now he's automatically pure. Rather, vitaher means that the next day when the sun rises, he has to go to the Beit Mikdash and offer a sacrifice in order to become pure. Maybe that's the case. No. Says Rabba bar Rav Shila, if that was the case, it should have said vitar. It should have been in a commandment, not a past tense, passive, but in an active sense of go, you're commanded to go purify yourself. And then the Gemara invokes a folk saying. Now this folk saying, we're going to talk more about it. But let's ask, why does the Gemara invoke a folk saying? What's the purpose of that? Who cares what the folk people say?
The people who don't understand the pshat of pasuk, so maybe they go hand in hand.
Very good. You're able to draw in from popular culture. Look how many times I said tonight, here comes the sun. You're referring to a song, no? It's a song that many people are familiar with. That's what the Chachamim do. They're telling you something, and there's a machloket as to what they're exactly trying to teach you from here. But let's say, at least in an initial pshat, the word v'itke, v'idaki, this day, that the day has passed, is in the same past tense as the word v'taher. The Hebrew and the Aramaic add up. In which case you see that when the sun has set, the day has already passed us. It's already behind us. And in that case, the folk people now understand, oh, that's just like the way we say it in Aramaic is the way that the Torah meant to say it in Hebrew. That's the purpose of invoking here, this folk saying. The Gemara now wants to bring another proof. What's another proof? Another proof that the pasuk means what the Beraita says it means, and what we're saying the Tana says it means. So the Gemara goes somewhere else. B'ma'arava. Where's Ma'arava? Where's the west? If you are sitting in Bavel, where's west of you? Israel. So though we might call today Israel the east, what does Rabbi Yonatan Halevy famously write? He says, I am in the west, but my heart is in the east. This is the other way. Here we're on the other side of Israel. So for us, Israel is the general direction of the west. B'ma'arava. You hear this a lot. B'ma'arava is something that you use synonymous with the word Eretz Yisrael in the Talmud. So in the land of Israel, Had Rabba barav Shila lashmiya lehu. This teaching of Rabba barav Shila, they didn't hear about this teaching before. What do you mean they didn't hear this teaching? Why didn't they hear this teaching?
Different centers of learning.
Yeah, very good. Different yeshivot, different locales. One's in Eretz Yisrael, one's in Bavel. They didn't get this pshat yet. But there is an Aderet Eliyahu. Aderet Eliyahu writes, Lo shmiya lahu. It's not they didn't hear it, it's they didn't accept it. They didn't accept his logic. I mean, they had a different way to understand this halakha. Though I will tell you that in my understanding, the pshat of the Gemara is they didn't hear. I mean, it is not a pshat that they heard. They had a different reason. Uba'u la mibaya. And they had a safek. I mean, they are now in trouble. Because they didn't have this teaching of Ababa Rav Shina, they're in trouble. And they had a safek, they had a doubt. What was their doubt? Hayuva shemesh biyat shimshohu. Umay v'taher tahar yoma. What does it mean, Uva Shemesh, the sun came and that's sunset? Odilma biyat orohu. Umay v'taher tahar gavra. Or maybe it's talking about sunrise, and what does it mean? It means that the next day he has to go bring a korban in the Beit HaMikdash. Meaning they're having the same question we're having. We asked the Beraita, how do you know that this is talking about sunset and then eating on the 8th night? Maybe this is talking about sunrise and you're eating on the 8th day after you bring your korban. So we have an answer. Rabba Rav Shila says, the pasuk says vitar, v'taher, not vitar. The pasuk uses a past tense, passive word, not an active tzivui, not a commandment to go eat. But in Eretz Yisrael, they didn't have this teaching. So they were stuck. They didn't know what the correct thing to do was in this scenario. V'hadar pashtuna. And so they, afterwards, found a solution to this problem. From where? Mibaraita. From a Baraita they found it. But two people can reach the same truth in two different ways. Sometimes you find people that have nothing to do with each other, but their truth still meets, because they're looking for the same thing, maybe through different tunnels or different lenses or different places, but there's something common there. Harav Kook has a piece in Orot HaKodesh, which he says, Talmidei Chachamim marbim shalom ba'olam. Torah scholars increase peace in the world. My father always says, there should be a question mark. Torah scholars always increase peace in the world? Which Torah scholar have you met that increases peace in the world? But Talmidei Chachamim marbim shalom ba'olam, why? Because they're students of what? What is a Talmid Chacham? A student of wisdom. And those who are students of wisdom realize that no one has a monopoly on wisdom, but the wisdom comes from Borei Olam. Wisdom comes from the Creator of the universe. And all of us are attempting to accomplish the same thing, even though we're doing it differently. And that someone who's truly a student of wisdom is at peace with other students of wisdom. Not because they agree with the method, because they agree with the destination, with what they're trying to accomplish. And they agree that any wisdom that is brought to the world comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, comes from the Creator of the universe. And therefore I can accept value in your wisdom, because all wisdom comes from the Creator of the universe. That's why when you see someone who's a wise sage of the nations of the world, there's a beracha that we recite over them. Why beracha? It's not a Jewish wisdom, it's not divine wisdom. All wisdom is divine. All wisdom in the world comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Even if they don't understand that it's divine, it's divine. That's how Torah scholars increase peace in the world. They show people that everything that we're learning, every study of the world, of the universe, of science, of wisdom, of ethics, of everything, comes from Borei Olam, comes from the Creator of the universe. And in that way, they increase peace. Normally, when people are passionate about a topic, they end up fighting over things. So for example, there are things I will argue with people about in halakha that you probably don't care about. What do you care? Make a bracha here, make a bracha there. Who cares? Because you're not as passionate about it as I am. And it's easier for a person like me to fight with people over something that's not so important to you. But when we stop back and read, we're both trying to understand the same Talmud. We're both trying to understand the same teachings of the Torah. So in that case, so we're all working together to reach a common goal. It doesn't mean we agree with each other, but we agree with what we're doing and where our information comes from. So v'hadar pashtuna. Afterwards, the Chachamim found an answer. Mibraita, from Braita. What's the Braita say? Mideketane b'Braita. It learned in the Braita. What does the Braita say? If you want to read the Braita in full, you're going to have a hard time reading the Braita in full. I'll read you the Braita in full. The Braita says, from when do the Kohanim eat their Teumah? Siman ledavar tzet hakochavim. When 3 stars come out. So what do you see from there? If the Chachamim elsewhere in the Mishnah taught you that the Kohanim eat Teumah when 3 stars come out, you learn from there. Biat shimshahu. There's no other thing the pasuk could be talking about aside from sunset. Umay v'taher. What does it mean v'taher? Taher yoma. That the day has passed and he's already become pure, even though he does not wait for tomorrow morning to offer his korban. So essentially, the Chachamim in Eretz Yisrael learned this whole idea out from another Beraita. Let me ask you a question. Did the Chachamim in Bavel have this Beraita? Could they have learned this idea out from a Beraita? Of course. So why didn't they? Why did they choose to learn it out from a pasuk in the Torah instead of from Beraita? Why does Rabbi Rav Shila why is he intent on explaining to you, according to Hebrew grammar, that the pasuk means what he says it means? Why doesn't he just bring proof from this Beraita? There's an easy answer. You can think of an answer.
Could you just say that the proof from the Torah is more direct than going to Beraita?
Of course, Pashut. It's so much better to prove something from the Torah than to prove something from the words of our rabbis. All kinds of people know what the Rambam says, what the Ramban says. How many people stop and study what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said? Everybody's familiar with all the books of the Musar, of all the different tzaddikim, the other generations. What about the books of Musar that HaKadosh Baruch Hu taught the Nevi'im, like Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu? What about all of those Nevuot? What about that Musar? I mean, listen, I'm not Rambam, Ramchal, whatever you like to study, study it. But why not first study Ko Amar Adonai Tzeva'ot? This is what Hashem, the Master of Legion, said. Before you start studying all the rabbis who are wonderful in history. Maybe study HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah first. Our Chachamim always prefer, when they can, to bring a source from the Torah itself, instead of bringing a source from another piece of rabbinic literature. Now both of them now agree to the same Peshat, so now they're agreeing. But they both got to the same truth from different places. So again, we learn here a few things. The first thing we learn is that the Tanah says that we come to, when the Kohanim enter to their Teumah, not because he's trying to be vague, he could have just had 3 stars come out, he's coming to teach us another halakha. That halakha is that even though a Kohen has not offered a sacrifice yet, he's already permitted to eat his Teumah. Why? Because once the sun sets and 3 stars come out, the day has passed and he's taho. That's what the Tanah is teaching us. The Tanah is building into the Mishnah another halakha. Agav Ochei. Along the road, he's teaching us another teaching. And now we have questions. How do you know that the pasuk means what you say it means? And we see from the Hebrew grammar of the pasuk. Uva Hashemesh, the setting of the sun, v'taher, the day passes and now he's pure, and he can eat his Teumah. And we also see from the rabbis of Eretz Yisrael that on a rabbinic level, in another Beraita, you see that the Kohanim enter to eat their Teumah already that night. They don't wait until the next day to eat their Teumah. Do you have time to just do Rashi with me? So we'll finish him today, and next week we'll do the next layer of the onion that we want to cover in the Gemara. So look here with me at Rashi. I'm just going to pull out Okay. Rashi writes the following. So if you're in the En Yaakov, we're in the top right column. Correct? And if we're not in the En Yaakov, you want to look for the Rashi in the inner spine of your book. So Rashi is always the column on the inner side of the book, never on the outer side of the page, but towards the binding. You want to look for a Rashi that says Mishat Tzedek Kochavim. I'll tell you where to find it in your Vilna Talmud. If you are on the first page of the Masechet, it's the last two lines. You see the last two lines in Rashi? It says Mishat Tzedek Kochavim. You see where I am? If you're in the En Yaakov, you're on the top right of the page. Says Rashi, Mishat Tzedek Kochavim, when 3 stars come out, Shehu Gmar Biat HaShemesh. 3 stars coming out is the end of sunset. It could be, by the way. It could be. I'm not going to dig through the halachic layers of this. It could be that this is already a connection to the Rabbeinu Tam opinion that you find in France, in which sunset is taking a very long time. It's a longer, I'm not saying for sure, just something to think about. Dilma biat oro. Shior HaShemesh b'yom hashmini v'yitar ha'ish atzmo v'yitaher ha'ish atzmo b'vat korbonotav v'achar kach yuchal. Maybe biat HaShemesh, maybe the coming of the sun means not that the sun sets on the 7th day and on the 8th night already he can eat, but rather the sun rises on the 8th morning, and only then, after he offers a sacrifice, he can become pure. Im ken, so the Gemara answers, if so, the haikra v'taher lashon tzivuyhu. This word v'taher is a commandment of something to do. Nemaka v'taher, my v'taher. The pasuk should have said v'taher, that he has to go offer a sacrifice. What does it mean v'taher? V'itke lashon avar. It's a past tense word. Nitpana min ha'olam ha'shemesh. The sun already left the world, and now he's pure. Mibraita, the kamar lekaman. Oh, look here. Like the Gemara is going to say later, this is the whole braita. Bishmatin, mishash hakohanim chazim lechol b'tumatan, siman ledavar tzedek kochavim. When do the kohanim enter Titer Tumah? When 3 stars come out. Shema mina en kapardan magvadan. You learn from here that their sacrifice doesn't hold them back, meaning that they can eat already their korban on the 8th night, and they don't have to wait until the 8th day. Can I show you something very cool before we go away? Open up with me the Vilna Talmud. So not the En Yaakov page. Go look at the other page of the Talmud. So it's just a regular Talmud. I attached a PDF. So go to the Zoom document. Don't click on the one that says En Yaakov. It says Aggadeta Talmud, it should say. It's intentionally copied for you the Oz V'Hadar edition because I want to show you something in their notes. So you know that the Talmud that we have in front of us has problems, many problems. There's a beautiful shiur of Chacham Faur, I think, about Masechet Avodah Zarah, from a Spanish manuscript of Masechet Avodah Zarah. I think I'm referring to it correctly, in which having an original Sephardic version of the Talmud makes all the difference in how you understand what's written in the Talmud. You know, very often rabbis say, oh, the Rambam, he diverged from the Talmud and he said something else. Most likely the Talmud you have is the Catholic Church version of the Talmud. And the Rambam was fortunate enough not to have the Catholic Talmud. He had a Jewish Talmud. And because of that, he reached the conclusion that his Talmud made him reach, and not the conclusion that your censored Talmud made you reach. So on the left column, so if you're looking at the first page of the Talmud, in the big flowery letter, it says Me'ematai. You see in the Vilna Talmud? It's the first Mishnah, the first page. Yes? If you're in the PDF, I'll tell you where it is right now. If you're in the PDF, it's Aggadeta Talmud. It's going to be on the second page of the PDF. Okay, so look on the left column. There's a few sections, but there's one section, two sections, and a third section. So all the way on the left, there's like little narrow columns. This section is called Haghot v'Tzionim. You see that? It's like miscellaneous notes. Okay? So you see there's a Rashi script that's bolded. It says Aleph, skip that. Bet, a few lines down, skip that. Gimel, a few lines down, skip that. Dalet, a few lines down, skip that. Every one of these things is coming to tell you that there is a variant text of the Talmud, either in a handwritten manuscript, or in a Yemenite manuscript, or in Rashi's Talmud, or in the Geonim's Talmud. So this comes to tell you about various alternate versions of the Talmud. A word here, a word there, a missing letter here, an omitted letter there. Look at Hey. Hey starts at the beginning of the line. You see where it says Hey? It's a Rashi script Hey. Yes? It's about halfway down the middle of the page, on the all the way in the left column. Look what they say here. B'kitvei yad. Oh, sorry, I didn't tell you first. But hold your finger on the Hey. Go look at the Rashi column. Rashi column was the one all the way on the right. So Rashi, the last letter that you see on the page is the little Hey. You see the little Hey? Yeah, that little Hey is referring you to the miscellaneous notes section. Why is there a little Hey over there? Because it says the following. B'kitvei yad, in the handwritten manuscripts of the Talmud. Uvetfus rishon, and in the first printed edition of the Talmud. Which Talmud is the first printed edition of the Talmud?
Lovely.
Yeah, which Talmud? Which is the first printed edition of the Talmud? Printed meaning in a printing press.
Maybe in Amsterdam? Not Vilna for sure.
Not Vilna, that's for sure. That much I'll agree with you on. Look, read the next word for me. In the parentheses. What does that word say? Zev, you're saying something, but I don't hear you. Sansino, very good. That's not referring to the Sansino, the Sansino that was printed in the 1950s, I don't know, 60s, and not that Sansino. Very good.